Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my weekly wrap-up of June 7th, 2015. I hope you guys have had a good week and are having a good weekend. It has been blue skies, sun this weekend. I've really enjoyed it. I also had to turn on my air conditioner for the first time this year because it finally got warm enough that had to happen. This is also my second time filming this today because I did an entire hour of filming and then found out I had my microphone disconnected. Whoopsie! The first book that I finished this week was the audio version of The Magician King by Grossman, the second book in his Magician series. This is definitely the most controversial, divisive, you either hate it or you love it series I have ever come across. And thankfully I tend to be on the more I love it, I like it end of things, but I may be one of those rare people somewhere in the middle just going, yeah, that's a pretty good story, but it's not like the best thing ever. It's not, the worst thing ever either. The Magician King picks up maybe a few years after the end of the first book. The main character, Quentin Coldwater, is a king of Fillory. He and his friends are the kings and queens of Fillory, and he's starting to get a bit bored. He wants a magical quest to shake up his life. I think at the beginning he wants to have a magical quest so that he can feel important and do magic and have some spice in his life. And he goes off on this adventure to a distant island of Fillory with Julia, and they accidentally get booted back to Earth, and then they're scrambling trying to get back to Fillory, and then they stumble across some things about the true nature of magic in their world and a threat to Fillory and magic as they know it. I really enjoyed Julia's perspective. Like every other chapter is her story about how she learned magic in the safe houses, on the street, from other people because she didn't get into break bills, but the mind-wiping thing didn't work on her. So she always knows that magic exists and she has this hunger for it. She needs to learn magic. And you get this really interesting contrast between her really hard education in magic and what appears to be Quentin's almost charmed magical education at break bills. Now, I'm not saying that Quentin had it really easy and didn't make any sacrifices either. You get to see in the course of the series how everyone is so damaged and makes sacrifices and has to give something up and they get hurt in some way because of magic. But Julia's story was really hard. You really see by the end of it how she can be so broken even though she is magically powerful. So I really did enjoy this book. I liked it much, much more than the first book, probably because you can already start to see how characters are changing and becoming less like assholes, I guess. Sorry for the language, but they totally are in the first book. So I would recommend it. If you're on the fence about the first book, maybe read the second book and see how you feel about it then. The next book that I read was Glamour and Glass by Robinette Kowal, the second book in her Glamourist History series. And you probably heard me say multiple times now that I just thought the first book was okay. It was too derivative of Pride and Prejudice. And this book benefits greatly from Kowal stepping away from the storyline, the character types of Pride and Prejudice and going out and telling her own story. It still feels kind of like Jane Austen. It's set in, Regency era England and it has a lot of the social conventions that you see in Jane Austen's works, but it's definitely Kowal's own story now, and I'm not mentally comparing it to Jane Austen's works or trying to predict what's going to happen based on what I know about Jane Austen's novels, which is good. I don't want to make that comparison all the time while I'm reading it, that is. So let me explain the magic system first. Glamour is what they call their magic. It's like folding light. It's not a physical form of magic. It's a lot like illusions. It's not very practical. So in fact, it's lumped in with other women's arts. It's considered to be something that women do in the same way that they do drawing, painting, embroidery, and sewing. It's pretty. It's like doing art. So it's interesting that Jane's husband, Vincent, is a very well-known glamour artist because he's a man and he has overcome a lot of things in his family in order to practice what's considered to be a womanly art. And when he meets Jane, Jane kind of learns that she has more skill and glamour than she really gives herself credit to. And after their marriage, she works with Vincent on these big artistic glamour projects that he does. So when this book picks up, they've been married for a couple of months. They've just completed a large project for a member of the royal family. And then they go to France right before Napoleon returns unexpectedly during, I think it's called the 100 Days. And that throws things into, yeah, shenanigans happen. But also, Jane is becoming convinced that Vincent isn't telling her something. He's keeping something from her. He's not acting like he trusts her very much. And she's very disturbed by this. She thinks there's something wrong in their very young marriage. And it's about her discovering what's really going on. And I really like Jane as the main character. I think the reason that my opinion of the series has changed so much is that I realize how much I like the relationship between Jane and Vincent. Their marriage is much more interesting than I thought it would be. And I loved how practical and open Jane was with her husband. When things are going wrong, she doesn't stop talking to him, but she also doesn't like become overbearing. She's very clear and honest and frank with him about how she's feeling. She does very well at trying to communicate with him, and I like that. There's something about their relationship dynamic that I really enjoyed. So, like I said, I'll be reading the next 2 books in the series very quickly. Next, I read The Paper Magician by Charlie N. Holmberg, and just heads up, I didn't like this book very much. There are just multiple things. By the time this video goes up, I will actually have a longer review of this book posted on Goodreads, so I'm just going to link that down below. If you want to know in more detail what didn't work for me, then go read that. I guess I'm not going to repeat myself too much here. It's a debut novel. It has very weak writing. It has a lot of promise with the characters and the magic system, but it's weak writing. The action is, instead of being like dynamic and more intense, it's just flat and repetitive. And the main character, who's a young woman, has a romantic interest that I don't like. It's just a relationship type that kills books for me. Basically, young women falling in love with their teachers or their mentors, who are usually older, more experienced men, and they have... No, I don't like what that says about young women having relationships with men. I think it's really icky to constantly depict women falling in love with their teachers. It's like, no, I'm going to go on a rant, so read my review if you want to know more. The next book that I read was The Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. It was my favorite book of the week, and I've actually cut out my footage of this and moved it to a separate review video, which will be up later in this coming week, because it was a bit too long for a wrap-up. I'm just gonna do that. I made the executive decision, so I loved it. It was fantastic. It was a great conclusion, the second half of the story that was begun in Hyperion, and I highly, highly recommend it. And watch my review video if you want to know more about it. The last thing that I read this week was The Complete Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This is a graphic memoir about her life growing up in Iran right after the Islamic Revolution in 1979 through the Iran-Iraq War, which lasted for 8 years, and then her life when she came back to Iran after studying abroad for 4 years and kind of after the Iran-Iraq War. What I've taken away the most from this is this big message about how the people who live in Iran, or really, I think any of the countries in that part of the world, like Iraq and Afghanistan, there are these massive, pretty terrible stereotypes of what these people are like, what their values are, how they behave, and it's completely the opposite from what their lives are like in private. Now, Satrapi's family and her circle of friends are pretty intellectual, college educated, like middle class, I think. So I think that just highlights the divide between their private lives and their public lives. In private, they are wearing Western clothes, makeup and jewelry. They're, mixing the genders, the sexes at parties. They're drinking. They're listening to, I swear, probably like Metallica or something. But in public, they have to conform to all of the religious, traditionalist, political rules. So I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the message and how it made me think about my own honestly my own prejudice about people from that whole area of the world. They're different than what the propaganda tells you. So I would highly recommend this one. That is it from me this week. I don't have a really good ending. That's just, I've been talking for a really long time and I feel like I need to stop talking now. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have read any of these books, please comment down below. Tell me what you thought about them. I love hearing from you guys. And until my next video, bye.